Mute. Start video. Good morning. Welcome to this HealthFlix presentation. I am going to be facilitating with you. My name is Cheryl Demark. I'm a physical therapist and a yoga therapist. And today we're going to talk about how yoga supports self-care and how self-care supports healthcare. And we're going to focus on informal practices that we can do. And informal practice is just a natural outflow of formal practice that we really live with and live by. And I find that doing fairly continuous informal practice in my life is my method of self-care. So I have this opportunity to share with you some ways that we can do that quite easily to make our self-care something that is sustainable for us. Okay. So before we begin with the slides, I am going to encourage you to help me begin this process with the use of a yoga practice that is called Yoga Mudra. We always have our hands handy. So Yoga Mudras are a beautiful way to presence and practice. So to begin with, we can use what's called Sankalpa Mudra. And Sankalpa Mudra is about setting a resolve. So I ask you to join me today in setting a resolve around having just an open mind to learning something that may be very new to you, and an open heart that always is helpful to taking in and truly, learning anything. So Sankalpa Mudra involves placing your left hand on your right thigh. So that's going to go out of the screen. So your left hand will rest on your right thigh, and then your right hand is going to just couple nicely with your left hand and rest upon your thigh. Okay? So let's just take a few moments holding this gesture and just feeling your hands. And then just feeling yourself breathe however you are breathing now. And then you can bring your attention to the rise and fall that's naturally happening at the heart, at the chest. And just set this resolve for spending the next 40 or so minutes together, learning about self-care and how our yoga practices can support us in this self-care. It is oh so important always, but especially during these trying times that we are all in at this phase of life, navigating this pandemic time. Open heart, open mind. And you can release your hands. And I am going to screen share and follow my slides to keep me on track. So this worked a moment ago. Let's hope technology prevails. So I'm hopeful that we can all see this. So this is our topic, that healing happens when we take 5 and to thrive and engage in sustainable yoga-based self-care practices. So I am a physical therapist. I'm also cross-trained as a yoga therapist, and yoga therapy is an emerging profession. Yoga is quite ancient, but the profession of yoga therapy is something that, you know, is emerging, and people like myself and many of the other presenters in this program are cross-trained as yoga therapists, or are yoga therapists. It's an entity of and by itself. So this is the definition on the screen of yoga therapy. So it's a process of empowering individuals toward improved health and well-being through the application of the teachings and practices of yoga. Okay. So if you wish to contact me after this program, I've put my own website and contact information there for you on the bottom. I spend my professional life at this stage doing all I can to support this International Association of Yoga Therapy mission to bridge yoga and healthcare. So opportunities like this give me a chance to cross that bridge. So to start us off with some teachings of yoga, there are 4 aims to human life according to the yoga tradition. So having a life that we really enjoy and find great pleasure in is the first aim. And then finding ways to have really right livelihood that supports a lot of the ethical basis of yoga practice and teaching. It's one's purpose, right? How we use our energy in life. So that's the second one. And then third, if we are enjoying our lives and realizing our purpose in how we support ourselves in the world, then hopefully we begin to make skillful use of the things in this material world. They're here for us to create and enjoy, take pleasure in, use to support our purpose. So then when we do that, that begins to attract a certain degree of wealth, both in terms of non-material and material wealth. And then finally, if we do those 3 aims and we practice regularly, then we have this opportunity to find freedom, to be liberated from any suffering that might arise as we work through and navigate all of these other aims. Okay, so that is a very important part of our yoga philosophy. And so to bring it down to one strong word, if we achieve those 4 aims, then we really are truly thriving. And to thrive, we have this opportunity to adopt another belief from the teachings of yoga, and that is that the universe is abundant, right? There is enough. And that helps us just kind of set the tone, lay the groundwork to be able to truly thrive. So in the practices and teachings of yoga, we learn about things oftentimes by looking at both sides of them. So we can learn about thriving also by, recognizing what it means when we're not thriving. And so this is what the thesaurus tells us about not thriving, okay? Which really is, if we look at these things, they are various forms of suffering. So it helps us to relieve suffering. It helps us to be able to thrive, to recognize anything in our own habits, beliefs, conditioning that has led us to view life as not a place of abundance, and the universe as not a friendly place. Okay. So naturally then suffering becomes, an opposing force to being able to thrive. And suffering is a pretty big word. It's kind of a strong word that probably has different meanings to different people. So for our purposes today, we're just going to talk about it so that we come to a, at least a baseline understanding of it, and it expresses differently in each of us. But, according to the teachings of yoga, suffering comes with taking on human form. So it's a common experience for humanity. It tends to be rooted in taking on human form, that sort of it's a consequence, if you will, of having a human experience can lead us to forgetting what our nature is, which is not subject to suffering. Okay, so on a pretty simplistic level, when I talk about suffering with others, I say, suffering happens anytime we're resisting what is, right? Anytime we're resisting what is happening now, anytime we go back in time and rehash and resist that which has already occurred in our lives. And then also we suffer if we leave the present moment and are continually futurizing, especially with a tone of worry or lack of abundance, right? This causes us to suffer. Now, the good news is, even though suffering is very likely, according to the teachings of yoga, it is staying in states of suffering. Staying in states of suffering is optional, and in fact, yoga says, here we have this path to freedom. Okay, there's relief if you are suffering. So, as we look at how humans thrive, for many of us, thriving happens after we attend to aspects within us that need healing. And that's where yoga therapy comes in, is it helps us to recognize, where in our existence we need to invite some healing to happen so that we can then thrive. So these two definitions come from a study that was done through the National Institutes of Health that looked at how do we promote healing? What a novel idea in healthcare, how do we promote healing? So it uses these definitions to speak of what healing is, and I find them both very helpful and very pertinent to what yoga is and what yoga does for us when we practice. Okay, so these three conditions or attributes of healing were identified in these studies. So if we are able to engage in things that help us feel connected, if we're able to engage in life reflectively, if we take some time for deep introspection and learn how to develop trust and acceptance, these in Western terms, these things promote healing, and healing then enables thriving. And so our yoga practices absolutely cover what these points are saying we need to be able to heal and to thrive. So, it's a win-win. So to thrive, we need to heal. And then to bridge that gap, like, how do we do this, right? There has to be some self-care that's involved. And yoga is very much a tradition and a practice that is done in often with the guidance of a teacher. It's done in group, but it's a personal practice that is then shared in community. So there's an absolute element of self-care to our yoga practices. So again, taking the way that we often present things in yoga teaching, we learn what is by exploring what it is not. So self-care is absolutely not looking at yourself as a mess or, you know, a broken human in need of some massive remodel project. Okay. It's not that, because if we treat it like that, then it tends to turn into this, you know, to-do list, and that feels overwhelming, and therefore it is not likely to happen. So self-care is not that. Yay. Um, the way that I like to promote self-care to myself and to all those who I work with, is that it really is, how do I, you know, want to be so as to be able to thrive? Like, how do I want to be? What conditions, you know, how do I need to lay prepare the soil? I like to garden a lot, so for me, garden metaphors are helpful. Um, so it really is a form of intention, like I intend to take good care of myself, right? So to do anything with consistency, we need to truly value it, right? It has to have a meaning, it has to have a value to us. And, you know, so I really appreciate the work of social scientist Brene Brown in supporting a lot of self-care. It really fits in well with a lot of what we do in yoga. So this definition of value I find helpful. So I'll pause a moment so you can read it. Okay, so to engage in self-care, it needs to really truly become one of our core values. And we will thrive when we are in a state of integrity, which means that we walk, we talk, we think, we breathe, we move, you know, in alignment with what we value most in our lives. So it's a common little saying that, you know, the best practice, like, how's your practice today? Well, you know, bottom line is that the best practice is the one that you actually do. All right. And so we are most likely to do the things that we enjoy. It's, you know, natural. So teachers of meditation like Jon Kabat-Zinn, you know, he's very fond of saying that, you know, you need to have a love affair with your practice, right? You got to fall in love with it because it feels so good. All right. So I concur with that advice. So as a healthcare professional, you know, I promote self-care in various forms, you know, for 36 years. And I have found that sometimes folks will resist it. They'll resist self-care as something that is, you know, perhaps, you know, too self-centered or selfish, or, you know, I'll care for myself only after I care for everybody else. And then that particular care for self typically never happens because caring for others is a lot, especially these days. Yes. So if instead we frame self-care as a compassionate act, compassion happens when we recognize that suffering is present either in ourselves or other people, and then we act with compassion. We try to relieve that suffering. So if we frame self-care as an act of self-compassion, you know, I find that a helpful way to frame it. So you will engage in this particular practice after we are done today. I find that reflective practices help us to be introspective. And so this would be something that you, preferably by hand, spend some time writing and answering what you would feel like if you were thriving, right? I would know I'm thriving when, and these questions speak to what yoga considers the 5 treasures that all humans possess, right? So we have a body, yay. We have many, many different systems of energy that power this body, right? So you would ask yourself, how does my body feel when I'm thriving? How would I be using my energy? What would I be creating, or what would I be intellectually growing with? Or how am I serving others? Okay. Then thirdly, what's happening when I'm thriving? What is my state of mind? And of course, state of mind is the other side of what your emotional experience is in the moment. It's always going to be connected to state of mind. So when I'm thriving, what's my state of mind, and what sort of emotional experiences would I be having? And then when we are thriving, and particularly as we mature in our practices of yoga, we become more conscious human beings. So we become more aware of, the term here is interbeing, that comes from Thich Nhat Hanh. We become more aware of the we of the world rather than just the me of the world. So we become more conscious of our own experience. We're more conscious of the experience of others globally and beyond. And then finally, when I'm thriving, how do I recognize like this continual relationship that is present with the spirit that I am? Okay. So our yoga practices fundamentally teach us that we already, all these treasures, right? They give us what we need. It's all here. We don't have to go anywhere. It's all within. So that should be good news. So I'm going to take the rest of our time today to introduce you to informal practices, okay? Informal practices are, as I said earlier, they are an extension, an outgrowth of working with formal practices. Okay, and formal practice of yoga truly does require guidance and work with a teacher. Now, you can come into formal practice often by beginning to dabble in informal practices. Right, so they can be an outgrowth of formal practices, and they can also be an entryway into formal practices. Okay, so we're going to focus on the informal practice, so there's no perceived barrier. Okay, so informal practices are very sustainable because you can weave them into your day. So again, in my long experience as a health professional and the last decade as a yoga therapist, I can't tell you how many times I have heard others say, I so wish I had taken better care of myself, along the way. And so a favorite quote of mine that I will say to myself often is that, this is not a dress rehearsal. This is here, this is now, this is life. Life itself gives this ongoing opportunity for our practice, right? So the Yoga Sutras begin with the statement like, now is the time. So here we are. So I am going to switch screens to another document that I'm going to be hopeful that you're going to be able to see. These are the actual practices that are helpful to engage in. So let me escape this screen and let me go back to my Zoom here. And let's see. Let me see if I just go to this PowerPoint. Matthew, are we seeing this other document?
No, what you probably have to do is unshare and then share again and look to make sure you have to select a different screen. The document will show up on a different screen.
For some reason, I'm staying small in my Zoom and I can't quite get back to my big self in Zoom. But that's okay because you don't really need to lead these. I'm gonna go through them anyway. So you can still see me, is that correct?
Yes, you and the PowerPoint from your presentation.
Okay.
So if you unshare your screen.
Stop share. There it is. Okay.
And now
Here
if you
we
share
go.
again, you should be able to
Yes.
select a different screen.
There we go. Are you seeing a new screen?
Yes.
All right. See, open heart, open mind, curiosity, faith that the universe is abundant and technology will work. Okay. So we'll take the next few minutes, or actually the next 15 or so minutes to just go through these simple steps. And these steps are steps that can lead you into practicing meditation. They're like stepping stones, right? So the first step is becoming present to the here and now. So just go ahead and you can find a comfortable position. You can sit or you can stand. You can lay down if you want to change your position. It's all fine. And I'm just going to talk you through these things so that we experience them. So the first thing to work with is what we call showing up. So the way that our nervous systems work, we have a whole lot of feedback that comes into the brain from sensory feedback that comes into the brain from the face, the hands, the feet, the pelvic floor, the mouth in particular. And so that means we can use these places to bring our attention to as a way of more rapid presencing because they have a lot of input happening anyway. Okay, so whether you're sitting or standing, just begin by feeling your feet. Find mentally each of your toes on both of your feet. If you're sitting, feel where your bottom is contacting your seat. That's the floor of your pelvis. If you're laying down, just place your attention in the place on the base of your torso that is between your sits bones and behind your pubic bone, but in front of your tailbone. That is the floor of the pelvis. And now shift your attention to feeling your hands. Some people like to just wiggle their fingers or gently rub their hands together as a way of bringing attention to hands. And now you're going to shift your attention to your jaw. Your tongue. And the corners of your lips. If you're enjoying yourself in the moment, the corners of your lips may be slightly upturned. And then move your attention to the outer corners of your eyes. And then finally the set of your brow. Okay, so this is a way of bringing you into the here and now. It's a way I often open yoga sessions that I lead. So now the next little practice is to kindly anchor your attention, right? First you got to show up, then you kindly anchor your attention. So training our attention is a skill that we can build with regular practice. So you can take any object right now that's within your field of view, or you can use your own hand. And the practice is to just hold your attention on whatever you have chosen as your object. So something in the room, something in your pocket, or your hand. Okay. And just tell yourself you're going to hold your attention on it. Well, typically, it doesn't take more than a few breaths to recognize, oh, this is maybe a little more challenging than I would have realized. Like my attention would like to wander. That's the nature of the mind. It's quite mobile. So when your attention tries to wander, we're kindly anchoring attention. So simply just say, oh, thank you, not now. This is a silent thing you say to yourself whenever your attention gets hijacked elsewhere. It's like, no, thank you, not now. Back to my chosen object. And if you're like most people, you pretty quickly start deciding whether you're good at this or not so good at this. That would be judgment. So you say, oh, that's also a tendency of the mind. It's always trying to decide if whatever's happening is worth paying attention to or not. So just recognize when that shows up, the tendency to say, I'm good, I'm not good at this, and just, again, thank you, not now. Just allow it to be let go. So when we try to hold our attention, it can be a bit of a misconception to think that this is necessarily going to be relaxing. It may or may not. You come to a pretty direct witnessing of how mobile your mind actually is when you try to confine it a little bit. Okay. So obviously, when you practice these things outside of this YouTube HealthFlix experience, you're going to take more time with them than I am taking here. But my teachers have always said, just start with something like 3 minutes. You know, who of us can't take just a couple of minutes to find the time to do something? So I purposely called this Take 5 to Thrive. Take 5 minutes. Okay, so you've shown up. You've kindly attracted your attention and tried to give it a little bit of a container. So now, hopefully, you're feeling fully arrived where you are, watching this YouTube, listening to my voice. And the next brief practice is refreshing your senses, okay? There's continual input from our sensory organs into the nervous system. So it's sometimes quite overwhelming and bombarding in our modern culture. So this practice is just called refreshing your senses. So again, you can shift your posture if you wish to just anything that you find comfortable. And we are just slowly going to visit each of our senses. So you can begin simply by noticing the touch of your clothing on your body, or the feel of your body on the floor or in the chair. Just what's your sense of touch at the moment. Just register that. You can even join your hands again if you need more of a stimulus, a gentle rubbing of your hands together, a gentle moving of your fingers, right? The sense of touch. You can do this in any order. So now bring your attention to the mouth. And first you can notice if your mouth is dry. If your mouth is dry, it's hard to taste. If your mouth is dry, you're probably not feeling particularly relaxed, or maybe you really need a big drink of water. But we're going to bring our attention to the sense of taste by coming to the mouth, the interior of the mouth. Just notice what your mouth tastes like. Some people like to gently revolve their tongue around the inside of the mouth, behind the lips, not sticking it out in space. Taste your breakfast or lunch or whatever time it is where you are. And now shifting to smell. So just notice what the air that you're breathing, what it smells like. And smell and taste go together, as you may have noticed whenever you've had a cold. Sometimes you can sort of smell the taste of your own breath. Maybe there's some flowers in the room. Maybe you use some essential oils. The olfactory sense, the sense of smell, is a very direct path to the nervous system. So a pleasant smell is always a good choice. And then we're going to go to whatever you hear. So you can start with a most distant sound in your environment. And then you can bring it in and notice the sound in the room that you're in. And then the sound within your own body. Breath has a sound, and you can learn to listen kind of at the very back of the throat, close to the ears. Listen to the friction that occurs as breath moves out and in. And then some people would posit a sixth sense. We went through the 5 senses here. The sixth sense, you can associate that with what you see. So if your eyes are closed or not closed, close them now. And typically there's a play of light behind the eyes when you close them. And then you can take this further into like this sixth sense, this idea of what you see or sense intuitively. With closed eyes, you gently direct your gaze up behind your brow. And this invites a deeper sense, a deeper type of listening after you've gone through your other 5 senses. All right, and now we'll move to anchoring and counting our breaths. We'll make this the last thing we do, so that we leave time for some question and answer. So just simple breath counting. You can place your focal point for feeling your breath, either conventionally to do it either at the nostrils or behind your navel. So you would pick one of those 2 places and you would count your breaths. And it's good to count the exhaled breath. It just sort of naturally allows the exhaled breath to lengthen. And then that makes some more room for the next inhaled breath to arrive. And because our minds are a busy place, we're encouraged just to do this in counts of 10 breaths. If you go beyond that, you might mind wander. It's pretty likely. So you would do 10 breath cycles 3 times, and you would do that at the nostrils or the navel. Or sometimes when I'm doing my lead in this way to meditation practice, I have to do several rounds of 10, but at least 3 rounds of 10. So simple breath counting, it's actually, the literature supports this simple thing as a way to become mindful. Okay. So this last practice I'm going to not do just because of time and to honor questions. But I encourage you to do it. It's a self-compassion practice, and it's not something to be rushed through. So if I were to do it right now, I feel like we would rush through it. So this is something you do with your hands on your heart. It's a very conventional practice that is taught as a way of connecting to one's own heart, and then ultimately using the fruits of one's practices to serve others, to serve all. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share. And I'm going to ring this bowl for a moment as a way of kind of concluding our curious mind and heart time. All right. So Matthew, I think you're going to join us for some question and answer.
Yeah, let's see if anybody has a question. You can use the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen or the chat function if you have a question. And
okay, are you going to do that, or you want me to do that?
I'll watch it for you. I'm just telling the participants if they want to ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it's important for people watching that if you want to go back through these practices, you can certainly, this will be housed on the HealthFlix YouTube channel. And in addition, underneath that will be a link to be able to download both Cheryl's slides and the exercise handouts. So if you want to print them out or have them as a reference, that's going to be available for you to continue to expand and play with the practices that she so generously shared with us today. Let's see, there's somebody. Let's see. Are you doing any online teaching currently at this time?
I am not doing a current online teaching. I am gathering with my hula from many years in the local park so that we have open air environments and can do some practice together and enjoy each other's presence from 6 feet apart, as many of you are probably already doing. So.
I think that's it, but that brings us up to 1 minute. That's pretty darn close to the end. So we did it. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing those wonderful practices. Folks, there's a whole bunch of other practices at HealthFlix too that complement and give you a lot of choices. So that's healthflix.online is the website. And Cheryl's will be up, like I said, in just a few minutes, and later in the day we'll add those links for you to download the practices and her slides. So thank you, Cheryl, on behalf of all of us at HealthFlix, and I'll go ahead and close us out here in a second. And Thanks
Well,
again.
thank you, Matthew. And these Take 5 to Thrive practices, I have created them in honor of my brother who passed last year. And my goal is to have 52 of them up by the 5th of July, which is the anniversary of his passing.
Oh,
So
what a
yeah,
wonderful.
I'm halfway there.
Thank you so